Hey, how's it going, everybody? This is Chris. Welcome to a new year and a new project. And full disclosure, I think I've recorded that opening line no less than 3 dozen times at this point. It's been a minute. It's been a little while since I've done this, and you have my apologies for that. If listening to me talk was something you enjoyed, I apologize for not doing that for a little while. Anyway, like I said, it's a new year, and what better time to kick off a new project? I find that I work best when I have a fairly sizable project in front of me. Anybody who's followed my stuff for any amount of time will probably be familiar with the various lengthy projects I've taken on over the years, and I suppose I should probably introduce the one we're going to be discussing now, right? I'm calling the project NML Crossing, which may not be terribly clever, but it's a little catchy, right? We're going to be talking about the entirety, hopefully, of No Man's Land, the massive Batman Crossovent from, well, just about 25 years ago as of this current year. And the thing of it is, this project is both kind of out of nowhere and something that's been in the works for a very long time. Initially, I'd planned to, well, do what normal people do, just read it. I was just gonna go through the entire story and read it and kind of just move on from there. I quickly discovered that as a comic book receiver, as a comic book consumer, I am broken in a lot of ways, actually. But I'm to the point now where I have a difficult time reading things for fun. Without the immediate urge to go open up a Google Doc and empty my, adult analysis onto the blank page. It's difficult for me not to do that. I hope there's a cure somewhere out there for this, but I guess until we discover it, I'm going to be talking about stuff. So why No Man's Land, right? It's a pretty big departure from the stuff I usually write or talk about in all my time blogging and podding and being a whatever it is that I am. We've never touched on No Man's Land. So why now? Why No Man's Land? Why now? Well, I never read it. Well, that's not exactly true. I read the abridged trade collections back in, boy, around the turn of the century, I suppose. DC released a 5-part series of trade paperbacks collecting, I guess, the bigger moments of No Man's Land. Back then, back in the days before omnibuses and stuff, DC was pretty good about collecting things in trade, much better than Marvel was at the time. But the way they went about it was, I guess for a lack of a better term, it was very piecey. They didn't collect everything. So the No Man's Land story, which, like I said, I've never read in full, probably spanned, if we're including things like Cataclysm, Aftershock, Road to, we're looking at like 150 chapters. And these trade collections, I want to say there's only like 40 issues in there, so a lot of stuff is not accounted for in those trades. And since I only ever read those, there's going to be plenty of new information here to take in, play with, and discuss. And I'm very much looking forward to that. And that was going to be like my early mid-2024 reading project, just all by my lonesome, reading through this series and this big crossover event. And since I am fundamentally broken as a comic book reader, I figure we'll turn that negative into, well, I'm not exactly sure it's a positive. We'll turn it to a neutral, I suppose, and I will invite you all along with me as we work our way on the road to and through No Man's Land. And we're going to kick off the coverage with the prelude to Cataclysm, which occurred in Detective Comics number 719, March 1998 cover date. The story is called Sound and Fury, written by Chuck Dixon with pencils by Jim Aparo, Flint Henry, and Mark Buckingham. Or is it Buckingham? I never know how to say those names. Inks, Bob McLeod. Colors, Gloria Vasquez and Android Images. Letters, John Costanza. Edits, Darren Vincenzo and Scott Peterson. Denny O'Neil is not credited as an editor here. I don't know if he just didn't edit Detective or was left off as like a group editor. I don't know. I'm just reporting what I see here. Finally, this issue had a $1.95 cover price. And we open on a full-page spread of Batman getting the holy hell beaten out of him by some goober with a really bad soul patch. The goober in question is Morgan Momo Moog Tice. He's got a couple of different nicknames. He's a recent arrestee who's currently being ferried across the harbor from Gotham to Blackgate Prison. And, well, that bit about Batman getting his butt handed to him is the story that he, which is to say Morgan Momo Morg, is sharing with his fellow new inmates. They're having a hard time buying it, however, for, well, a few reasons. First one being that Momo is an absolute loser. And the second, and perhaps the most important one, is that, well, Batman isn't real. Gotta remember, this is post-Zero Hour, where Batman is nothing more than an urban legend. Which, I mean, I guess we all have opinions on that, at least those of us old enough. I guess I'll hand it to them for trying something different with Batman, but maybe this is something you do with like a less high-profile hero, right? This was always going to be a tough sell. I learned about the Batman as urban legend thing pretty late. I barely even dipped my toe into DC during the early to mid-90s, and only found out about the urban legend gimmick while checking out Usenet. And I mean, even then, as a relative newcomer to the comics fandom and a stranger to pretty much everything DC, I kind of felt like this was a bridge too far. Like, to the point where I thought the people on Usenet were making it up. Because I'm like, how could that possibly be true, right? Anyway, Momo's trip into flashback land continues. Now, you see, his thing was he was making arrangements at a Gotham dive bar to draft some wise guys who might have been called the wise guys. I don't know. He wanted to use them for one big last score. Now, he'd been a penny ante hitman for a while, but now he wanted to be his own man and call his own shots. And this shot turned out to be ripping off a bank truck as it was picking up cash from Santelli's one-stop shop. And this is something that he claims to have put months of planning into. Now, according to Momo, this heist was pulled off to perfection. Not a single hitch in the works. Though the action we're seeing on panel tells quite a different tale. And this is a really cool gimmick. We'll talk about it more as we get into it. Now, according to the artwork, Momo and his wise guys, or the wise guys, were, well, we'll say a sloppy bunch. There really doesn't look like there was all that much in the way of strategy put into this job. It kind of resembles an attempt at herding cats. We just got like dudes in ski masks all over the streets, like running in every direction, fleeing from police. It's quite a silly scene. Now let's hop back into Momo Vision, where his story continues. He recalls being in a getaway car, a mission just about accomplished, when the Batman arrived. Now the image we see of Batman portrays him as a monster. There's no other way to put it. Which I suppose is one interesting device from those urban legend days. Nobody really had a clear view of who or what this, horrific Batman could or would be. Now, Momo describes our hero as being 7 foot tall, 300 pounds. He had a mile-long cape and the claws of a tiger. Now, the next image we see is our normal view of Batman. He's just a, normal buff dude in a batsuit, and he is atop Momo's getaway car, jabbing a batarang into the roof of it. And from here, the juxtaposed, Momo story versus the artwork we're seeing gimmick, it really gets fun and creative. We get to see the scene play out both in Momo Vision and in, I guess, real life. And it's really funny stuff, and me describing it does very little justice. It's really, really fun. Suffice to say, along the left side of each page, we see this inhuman, monstrous, bestial Batman ruthlessly and bloodily taking care of business. But on the right, we're seeing Batman having a typical evening for a Batman, taking down some nothing-happening mook, right? Now, in a particularly humorous bit, Momo describes being punched by Batman, who is now up to 400 pounds, and he claims that he absorbed the punch. You know, this 400-pound, 7-foot Batman beast. He hit him with all his might, and he absorbed it. In reality, Momo was knocked out by Robin. Now, Momo talks of turning the tables on his assailant, pummeling the Batman into paste, which obviously didn't really happen. In reality, after Robin laid Momo out, he kind of just laid there until the police cuffed him. From here, we hop back to the present, where the ferry ride to Blackgate is just about over. A fellow inmate asks Momo why he's so banged up if the Batman wasn't much of a fight. And it's worth noting here that Momo, he is quite a sight. He's missing teeth, he's got a couple of band-aids on his face, his soul patch disappeared. He blames the car wreck for the damage to his already ugly face. It wasn't the Batman at all. Now, as the fellas are carted onto the dock, the shadow of a bat looms overhead, which pretty much sends Momo into the fetal position. Turns out that, well, this was just a bat. You know, a flying mouse, not an actual man. The inmates share a big-time laugh at Momo's expense, and they assure him that he'll be getting quite the hero's welcome inside Blackgate. You might be asking yourself, what in the hell does this have to do with an earthquake? Well, let's hop over to something completely different to answer that question. We shoot from Blackgate over to Spilkin Hill in Bristol Township. There we meet a seismologist. How do you say that? Seismologist? Yeah, I think so. So yeah, we meet this seismologist. Her name is Jolene Rilazzo, and she notes some unusual bat activity, which I suppose is a decent enough bridge to Momo and company seeing that bat a couple pages ago. Anyway, she is approached by a couple of kids who are trying to look for their lost dog. They see her and all of her odd equipment, and they ask what she's up to, which I guess is something I suppose kids might do. I don't know, I haven't been one in quite a while, if ever, so I don't know if approaching some odd stranger on a hill is something kids would do. Anyway, Jolene explains that she is a seismologist, and the kids ask if there's going to be an earthquake, to which Rilazzo suggests that they're actually long overdue for one, and it's due to this fact that she performs these regular readings. You see, there's a major fault line running under the very hill they're sitting on, which extends all the way across the harbor. From here, the kids ask who she works for. Okay, that's kind of an invasive question, and also not something I'd expect some random kids to care about. Jolene, however, doesn't seem shaken by this inquiry. No pun intended. She replies that she works out of a blind trust, which is to say she has not the foggiest idea who she works for. Though I'm pretty sure we could probably all guess what Gotham Area Foundation cuts her checks, right? Anyway, from here with a RARF, the kid's pup Rags arrives on the scene, so all's well that ends well. Only not, because just then the Jolene machine starts to deet, producing a printout that shakes her to her very core. Pun sort of intended, I guess. I'll try to keep that to a minimum as we work our way through. Jolene rushes down the hill to her Jeep to grab her cell phone. Imagine keeping your phone in the car. Weird. Anyway, she dials her unknown employer to report these readings and gets sent straight to voicemail. She reports these readings as, quote, a shifting of tectonic plates on a biblical scale. She describes the pending quake as, quote, a slow train heading Gotham's way, and when it gets here, nobody's safe. It's worth noting, or maybe not worth noting, but I'll say it anyway, none of these lines end with an exclamation point. So she's really rather composed in her reporting of, a biblical natural disaster. We close out here with the reveal that Jolene was actually calling the Batcave. And unfortunately for her, and I guess everybody else in Gotham, nobody's home. That was Tech 719. Next time, we kick off the Cataclysm story in earnest in Shadow of the Bat, number 73. Now, before we get into my sure-to-be bulletproof analysis of this issue, I wanted to share an essay that Denny O'Neil wrote in his From the Den column. I don't know if we'll be covering these every time out, though for all I know we might. It really all depends on how deep they go into the No Man's Land story, I suppose. Anyway, in this essay, we get some Denny discussion on crossovers. Now, he goes back into his own flashback land, jumping backwards in time some 20 or so months. It was then that he declared a moratorium on crossovers among the Bat books. Now, if we were to do the math here, and calendars have never been my specialty, nor has math, this would take us back to about a month before the Legacy storyline crossed over in all the Bat books. Maybe his math's off, maybe my math's off. Maybe he just wanted to take the Bat books out of the crossover business with a bang. Who knows? Anyway, it was then that Denny declared that for at least one solid year, that every story would end in the book that it began in. So no jumping across to other books in the Bat family. You get to stick with your book. He also said that every month would deliver at least one and done issue. So you get a beginning, a middle, and an end in one of the Bat family of books. And if I'm remembering right, I think they got kind of cute about it. Like, they would have an issue of Batman and it would say part 1 of 1. You know, have like the little Bat logo with a 1 of 1 in it. Just to, I guess, let you know where you'd get a full and complete story. Then he also proclaimed that storylines would not run for more than 3 issues. So you wouldn't be waiting the better part of a year for your story to wrap up. And of course, this is all after Legacy, which I'm guessing was already completely plotted out at this point of Denny's moratorium. And I gotta say, this is a solid plan, and dare I say, an uncharacteristically fan-friendly plan at that. Especially for the those relative few survivors of the speculation era. Well, that speculation era. It's kind of sad how the industry still hasn't learned any lessons from that. And speaking of the seemingly endless entanglement of crossovers that the Bat family books found themselves in, that gave me a bit of a quandary even in starting this project, because I wasn't quite sure where to begin. I mean, it's NML Crossing. We're going to be talking about No Man's Land. There's a No Man's Land read-through, but due to all the crossovers and such, the genesis of the storyline can be tracked back at least 2 years before the quake actually hits. And as I was putting together my little triptych for what books we're going to cover, this project very nearly became like an entire 90s Batman read-through. There's just so much to it. I mean, initially, the book we just covered now was not part of the project. It's like, do we start with No Man's Land number 1? Do we have to cover Road to No Man's Land before that? How about Aftershock before that, or Cataclysm before that? Or do we go back to Legacy, which would necessitate going back even further to Contagion, since those were elements of the story leading to Gotham being cut out of the United States? But then, do we have to even go further back and set the table for new players like Bane and Azrael? Which would mean including the Nightfall Saga and Prodigal. I mean, that's a lot of damn books before the quake was even a glimmer in Whoever the Hell's I, right? Hopefully, I chose wisely with the beginning of Cataclysm. Well, I guess time will tell, right? Back to Denny's essay. Now, he describes crossovers as sort of a blessing and curse situation. He says that they're frustrating, frightening, and exhausting, but also enjoyable, exciting, and challenging. All that to say, the Bat books are back in the crossover business. Now, he doesn't go into the No Man's Land a bit, which is to say he doesn't drop the hammer on the fact that we're pretty much headed into something like 2 years of non-stop crossover. He only discusses Cataclysm, which according to him will run through 17 issues of 11 titles and will total 438 pages. He does say that readers will be able to pick and choose which books they read. Every issue will have a beginning, middle, and end, which I suppose is something we will be the judge of. Denny wraps up by promising us a story unlike any we've ever read before, and a story that changes Gotham and Batman forever. And, well, if you know what we're about to get into, and if we discount all the DC Universe continuity toilet flushes we've survived since then, it'd be pretty tough to argue that statement. Next up, I wanted to peek into some Wizard magazines of the day here. We're going to start with a bit from Wizard magazine number 76, had a December 1997 cover date. Now, Wizard, yeah, they noticeably short-shrifted DC Comics back in the day, focusing instead on the more speculator-friendly books and companies. The Cataclysm story did manage to get an entire quarter page worth of coverage, though. The article reads that an earthquake rocks Gotham City in Batquake. Ugh. That's a horrible, horrible name. Thankfully, they didn't stick with it. The article continues, Gotham City is getting destroyed, and for once, it's by a menace Batman can't fight. Chuck Dixon is quoted as saying, it's destruction on a biblical scale. Dixon also discusses a brand new villain coming onto the scene who I cannot for the life of me recall. Dixon says, quote, Batman is faced with something he can't do a damn thing about. Until this new villain, who we haven't even named yet, claims responsibility for the earthquake, making him a big nemesis for Batman and Gotham. I gotta admit, it's been the better part of a quarter century since I last looked at No Man's Land, and I do not remember this bit at all. Maybe plans changed, maybe I'm just an idiot, maybe this is something that happens in Cataclysm. Full disclosure, I have never read Cataclysm. Like I said, I read the abridged trade collections of No Man's Land, and those did not start with Cataclysm. I want to say the first volume opened with No Man's Land #1, which, I mean, there was probably like a little text piece to get you where you needed to be, but yeah, we didn't actually see the Quake hit in those trade collections. I do own the trade for Cataclysm, I just never read it. I picked it up because No Man's Land was slated to be episodes 150 through 155 of the Cosmic Treadmill. Those who followed that show will know that for our milestone episodes, which is to say episode 50 and 100 at this point, we did these big, sprawling, epic stories. I think episode 50 to 55 was Crisis, and 100 to 105 was The Age of Apocalypse. And with 150, we were going to hop back to DC coverage, and we were going to do, the abridged version of the No Man's Land story, just relying on those trade collections. That didn't wind up happening, and thus I never read Cataclysm until right now. So it's totally possible that this new unnamed villain might loom large in the Cataclysm story. I guess we will find out together, because and we got Cataclysm, we got Aftershock, and we got Road to No Man's Land. That's a lot of pages and chapters that I have yet to read, so who knows. Dixon continues, somewhat ominously, by saying, the crossover may end in March, but in Gotham nothing is ever done right, so don't expect the wreckage to be cleaned up anytime soon, or possibly ever. Now, while I had this issue of Wizard in front of me, I decided to take a look at the Wizard Top 100, just to see where the Bat books stood at this point in time, and oh boy, it was a different time. It was definitely a different time. The top-selling issue of Batman was Legends of the Dark Knight #100, and it was the 36th best-selling book. These Bat books were not burning up the charts at this point. As a matter of fact, with the exception of JLA, DC is completely absent from the top 25, so different times, definitely different times. Maybe this earthquake or Batquake is the shot in the arm the Bat books are going to need to rise to prominence again for a little bit. And it might go without saying that we will be tracking those, the Bat books placement on the top 100 as we work our way through this, just to see if if there's any kind of jump, how big a jump, or maybe if there's no jump. Now, before we get out of the Wizard woods here, let's go into the next issue here. Wizard Magazine #77, January 1998 cover date. This issue briefly discusses the Bat books in their 1998 preview article. Quote, all the continuity Batman books plus a few specials will tie into the 2-month event, as the entire Bat family helps rescue survivors and tracks down the madman behind it. After the quake, Man-Bat will rear his ugly head along with Azrael, Mr. Freeze, Green Arrow, and nearly all of DC's martial artists. Now, the latter bit there is probably a reference to the Brotherhood of the Fist crossover, which we will not be looking at here. I think it might be slotted in like right between Cataclysm and Aftershock, though I don't remember. Speaking of not remembering, Like I said earlier, I don't remember there being a madman behind the quake. Maybe that'll be something we learn together. Now, with all my ephemeral vamping out of the way, let's talk about the issue. And I found this to be a pretty fun story. Though, the Momo stuff could have literally taken place at any point in time post-Zero Hour, right? That doesn't make it bad in the slightest. It's just kind of weird to look back on an issue that kicked off the road to No Man's Land and see that it's this kind of ephemeral urban legend story. And, it kind of reminds me of Man of Steel number 18. That issue kicked off the Death of Superman story with like this weird nothing happening underworlder story. It felt very, very strange that we were kicking off such a huge story with something kind of weird. Though, of course, in fairness, the Cataclysm story doesn't actually begin until Shadow of the Bat number 73. Now let's move Momo to the back here, and because for our purposes, and the reason that we're discussing this issue at all, is the epilogue portion, which I feel served its purpose, though maybe felt a little bit stilted. I feel like the entire thing could have been delivered with captions of Jolene's report, maybe like a minute-by-minute sort of thing, with exposition to explain why she's performing these readings in the first place. Now, I'm not saying that that would have made the scene any more interesting, but maybe a little less awkward than her being approached by a couple of oddly curious and wise boys. like really, one of the kids asked, "Who do you work for?" Like, "Papers, please." I don't get it. I feel like that's just so weird. Though, at the end of the day, it did facilitate the information being shared, so, what the hell do I know? We also get to learn that she works for Bruce Wayne unknowingly. She unknowingly works for him, and we're going to find out in the next couple of issues here, the next couple of chapters anyway, just how big into earthquakes Bruce Wayne is, or at least earthquake preparedness. Like, I gotta say, I don't recall that ever being, like, high on Bruce Wayne's priorities, but we're gonna find out that it was as we work our way through. And that's really about it. Not much more to analyze or belabor for this issue, which I will uncharacteristically accept and just put this analysis portion to bed. Overall, it was a fun issue and an important one in that it kicked off a very memorable and, dare I say, brave era for the Bat books, and ultimately DC Comics overall, because, when you're talking about the Bat books and where they stand in DC, it's hard to say that there's a Batman corner in the DC universe. It's more like there's a DC corner in the Batman universe sometimes. So, where the Bat goes, so too does the rest of the universe. Now, before we get out of here, I didn't want to make this too front-heavy an episode. I wanted to get into the comics chatter as quick as I could, but I did want to once again apologize for the sort of kind of literal radio silence. Is this radio? I don't know. I apologize for being away. 2023 was, it was a year, and I'll leave it at that for now. But I'm excited to be behind the microphone again. As terrifying as it is to be sitting here, it's so weird. Used to be I wouldn't even think about it. I would just pop behind the microphone and just talk for as long as I needed to talk. Here I was sitting here just kind of staring at it, and it was it's a long road back, I guess, but we will take it issue by issue and episode by episode, and I will let you get on with the rest of your day at this point, but not before I humbly thank you for choosing to spend some of your time with me. Now, of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts on No Man's Land. If anybody has any to share, please hit me up, weirdcomicshistory@gmail.com. The cool thing about this is that if you have access to Hoopla, which is like the free digital like public library app, I guess, I'm pretty sure the omnibuses of No Man's Land are available there. So you could follow along for free if you have a DC, DC Universe Infinite or Unlimited or whatever the DC version of Marvel Unlimited is. If you have that, I'm pretty sure all these issues are there too. So it won't be too hard to follow along if you choose to, and I definitely hope that you do. Anyway, I think that's all I've got for now. I want to wish you all a happy new year once again, and I'll hopefully be talking to you again real soon. See ya.